I thank the Chief Rabbi for initiating this get-together. And when I say get-together, obviously it means that those of you that took the effort to come to learn in person and to be here, there's nothing like learning in person. Nothing replaces the in-person and in-touch feel of learning together and discussing. And also to those who are going to be watching this afterwards, it's still worthwhile to learn and engage, even if it is virtually and not necessarily personally, in person nonetheless. It's important. I'm going to give a short introduction on the topic of Simcha, relating specifically to the month of Adar. And by way of introduction, I'll then introduce our Chief Rabbi, who's given of his time to be with us this evening. And Rebbe Gina, we wish you a Richas Yomim, a long life after the passing of your sister. And only Simchas, please, God, in your family. So I've got a short source sheet. I'm not going to go through all the sources this evening, but just to touch upon one or two and to bring across an idea that hopefully can be an introduction to our Chief Rabbi's topic of tonight. And we begin with the Shulchan Aruch. There's, in the Code of Law, the last siman, or shall I say the seif, the last seif of Shulchan Aruch of the Code of Law, discusses Purim Katan, which would apply more in a leap year, where you have Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, first Adar, second Adar. Generally, we keep Purim in the second month. And the debate in the commentaries is, what do we do about the Purim Katan? What do we do about the first Purim in the first month of Adar, in the Adar? And the debate is, should we have the festivities and the Su'udah and the meal and the celebrations, or shouldn't we? And we can see in the English at the bottom, where the Ramah, who is the source of Ashkenaz authority he's on the last word on the fifth last line called the Ramah, and there's a colon after that. And he says the custom is according to the first understanding. Well, there are those who say that one is obligated to increase in joy and feasting on the 14th of Adar Rishon, number one, Purim Katan. However, this is not our practice. We don't have a big meal on the first Adar Purim Katan. Nevertheless, one should increase their feasting slightly in order to fulfill the opinion of those who are stringent. So just to cover our bases, he says, we have some sort of level of celebration on Purim Katan, because there are those who say we should have a whole meal and a whole Su'udah like we would do normally on a Purim. But he doesn't necessarily hold of that. He says, Ktsat, a little part of a meal and part of celebration. And he brings a pasuk, a verse from Mishlei, from Proverbs of Shlomo HaMelech, to support his case. And he says, we got a verse that says, the good-hearted has a continual feast. That English is not a great translation of the Hebrew. So the Hebrew is in bold. Just on top of that, it says, V'tov leiv, the good-hearted, mishteh tamid, is continuously celebrating. The good-hearted always finds reason to celebrate. And the mishteh, the meal, and the festivities helps us celebrate. And therefore he uses that pasuk of Shlomo HaMelech, of King Solomon, to say that if we've got an excuse to celebrate, we should celebrate. And even though Purim Katan is not the real Purim, because Purim is only the second Adar in a leap year. By the way, this year is not a leap year, so don't get us confused here. We're not confusing this year. This year is not a leap year. Last year was, but the message is quite a fundamental one. So based on that verse, Tov Leiv, the good-hearted, Mishteh Tamid, should find a reason to be joyous all the time. And if Purim Katan is a good excuse to celebrate, grab the opportunity and celebrate. It's worthwhile. To give a context of that verse, what is this verse from Mishlei, from Proverbs? Source number 2 shows us, chapter 15, verse number 15, he says, all the days of the poor man, of the ani, are ra'im, are bad. Someone who goes through difficulties, sees negativity in front of his eyes all the time. We can relate. Kol yemei ani, when someone's poor, or should we say lacking or challenged, ra'im, all the days seem so bad and negative. And the second half is what we just read. V'tov leiv mishteh tamid. But the good-hearted is one who celebrates and finds reason or ability or the inner strength to be able to celebrate tamid continuously. So we see this contrast that Shlomo HaMelech is weighing up the ani, the poor person, and it doesn't necessarily mean financially, we'll soon see. So the days of the ani and the days of the tov leiv. And it's the contrast. The ani sees things negatively, and the tov leiv sees things as joyous and positive. What is a tool with which to be a tov lev? What is a tool with which to be a good-hearted person who can find reason to celebrate? Or to be that ani, that poor person who sees things as negative the entire time? It's the next quote of the Talmud in Baba Batra, quotes this contrast, and there's a number of opinions there of what the contrast represents, but I'm going to focus on the Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. You can see it in the third last line in the English. What is the contrast? Well, all the days of the poor are terrible refers to somebody here he translates as impatient disposition. But in Hebrew it really means da'ato ktsara. Ktsara means narrow. Narrow-minded, who's only to see the now, is someone who's seeing negative. If one's vision is one of da'ato ktsara, narrow vision, then we see ra'im, then we see negativity around us. But the next phrase, what does it mean, v'tov leiv mishteh tamid? What does it mean to be joyous the entire time? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, zeh sheda'ato rechava. Again, the translation isn't precise. One who has patient disposition. I would translate as someone who has broad-mindedness. Someone who's rechava, their da'at, their way of seeing things is broader. They see a greater picture to things. They're not just narrow. It's not just one tunnel vision, but you're able to see a rechava, a wider perspective. That is the definition of a tov leiv. That is someone who is good-hearted, and that is someone who is mishteh tamid, always joyous. And I think in a chaotic world that we're living in, and by way of introduction to the Chief Rabbi, is we've got to open our minds. And just coming out this evening to be able to engage and be able to learn is already an indication of our da'at rechava. We are broad-minded to want to learn more, understand more, earn and grow a greater mindset, a greater disposition. And please God, by doing that, we will enhance our tov leiv, our good-heartedness, as well as the mishteh tamid, being always besimcha. And so without further ado, without an introduction, I ask Chief Rabbi to share with us that inner insight to finding clarity in the chaotic world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Stern. So lovely to be here at Sydenham Shul and to have this opportunity to share some thoughts with you, all of you, today, as we prepare for Purim, which is just around the corner. And I think that Purim is such an important opportunity for us to reflect on the nature of this world and to try and find a framework for dealing with uncertainty and chaos, because that is actually the framing reference of what this festival is all about. But allow me to say that before we get into that, what a joy it is to be here at Sydenham. And normally here on Yontif, there's not an opportunity to record the shir. So enjoy the times of a Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, and the other times to visit this wonderful congregation, which has such vibrancy at every level. And I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to Rabbi and Rebbetzin Stern for the remarkable work that you do, the inspired leadership, the warmth, the compassion, the kindness, the innovation and the energy, the relentless energy to innovate and to bring new ideas and to do so with boldness and at the same time with care and compassion for each and every single member. And to thank you, Rabbi Stern, on a personal note for your friendship and partnership with so many things that we work on together. So I thank you for that, and I pay tribute to all of the wonderful work that is done here at Sydenham. So many vibrant things happening, youth minyanim and children's services, and on every level of what happens in this synagogue. And I think that Sydenham remains a very important beacon of light and an example of the vibrancy and the vitality and the central dimension of our big shuls and what our shuls bring to our South African Jewish community. Because ultimately what makes, I believe, our South African Jewish community so unique is the attachment to shul, the idea of being part of community, of congregation, that we don't live lives as siloed existence, but rather that we see ourselves as part of community, and shuls are at the front lines of that. So it's indeed a pleasure and an honor to be here. And now we can have a look at what Purim provides us in terms of a frame of reference, because we can look around at the world, both locally and internationally, and we see so many forces which are at play and create so much uncertainty. And it's not only on a local, national, political level or a global level, or what's going on in Israel. It is also in our own lives from a very personal point of view. Every person is grappling with different factors in life, and we're always looking to control, and we're looking to impose a sense of order on a world which refuses to have order imposed upon it. And we try to make sense of the world in which we live. And there's the human tendency, and it's a natural tendency of every human being. We're looking for patterns, we're looking for predictability, we're looking for a sense of certainty in the world. And yet, life in this world, in Olam Hazeh, by the very nature of life in this world, it defies prediction, it defies order. And that is, in essence, the struggle with chaos itself. And the struggle with chaos goes right back to the very beginnings of creation. Because when God created the world, it says, it was tohu vavohu, there was chaos and void, v'choshech al pnei tehom. And the Midrash points out, our sages point out, that God created the chaos in the first place, because one of the foundation principles of Judaism, of the Torah, is that God created this world, yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing, that there was nothing, and then God brought all of existence into being. He didn't work with existing matter. So when the book of Bereshit and the book of Genesis says at the beginning of history that there was chaos and void and there was darkness over the abyss, that means that God actually created that in order for that to be. God actually created the chaos at the beginning, because if he didn't create it, why was it there? It wasn't as if there was pre-existing matter that was chaotic and dark and void, and then God somehow formed it into this universe. The most important foundation principle when we refer to God as the creator, that means the creator of everything. There was nothing before. Bria yesh me'ayin, creation from nothing. And that means, therefore, says the Midrash, that God actually created what was described at the beginning of the book of Genesis, including the chaos. And that means that embedded into the very fabric of existence. And Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik makes this point in his famous essay, Halachic Man. He makes the point that God willfully embedded chaos into the very fabric of existence, which means there's a force of chaos which lies beneath the surface of everything that we engage with, from the most mundane level to the most sophisticated and sublime. On the most mundane level, the human being and this world tends towards chaos. If you don't look after your garden, it is going to become overgrown, and it will not be a livable space. Your pool will go green if you don't look after it, and the house will turn to ruin if it's not looked after, if one doesn't regularly paint it and waterproof it. That is the nature of existence. Everything tends towards chaos. The human body tends towards chaos. We don't look after the human body through personal hygiene, through health and fitness and all of these things. The human body also tends towards chaos. It's built into it. And so too the spiritual world also tends towards chaos. That's why we have mitzvahs which impose structure and order. The very dimension, the very nature of a mitzvah, of the halakha, is that it is a framework, it's a structure. It imposes a sense of order and to give us the framework to develop ourselves spiritually. So all of this amounts to the following, is that chaos, unpredictability, the fact that life is not certain, the fact that we cannot control events, that we cannot control the future, all of that is not something that just happens to be. It's not a departure from the norm. It is the norm. Chaos is the norm. Unpredictability is the norm of human existence. And therefore we have to make peace with it. We have to find a framework to deal with it. We need a sense of being able to understand, how do we approach it? How do we understand and accept that that is the nature of this world? And then within the context of that, not only live and tolerate it, but use that framework actually to thrive in our lives. And that's where I think that Purim comes into it. Because Purim, the very essence of this festival of Purim, is the nature of chaos itself. And if you think about it, that was the name of Purim. Where does this festival come from? You know, if you were looking for a name for this festival, it would probably be the very last name that you would have chosen. Because what is this festival about? What happened on Purim? What happened on Purim is that there was an attempted genocide. We're talking in the context of Jewish history, more than 2,500 years ago, plus when when we were talking about the exile, when we were found ourselves under the control of the Persian Empire. The Babylonian Empire had destroyed the first temple, sent us into exile, and now the return to Israel had just begun, and we were under the Persian Empire, and this decree was imposed for the attempted genocide against all Jews. This decree that was initiated by Haman, but it was implemented by the king Ahasuerus. And the methodology of the decree, and if we ask what was the essence of what was going on in Purim, there was an attempt to wipe out every Jew, and the Maharal makes the following point. It was one of the few times in Jewish history where every single Jew was actually under the political control of a single empire and a single emperor. And therefore, had they been successful, there would not be a Jew alive today. Even at the darkest moments of Nazi Germany, there were Jews who were not under the control of Hitler. There were Jews in America, in Australia, in South Africa, Jews in Israel. There were Jews scattered all over the world. Of course, we lost to, with horror and with sadness, we lost European Jewry because they were under the control of Hitler, but there were parts of the Jewish world that were not under his control. But during the time of Purim, everybody was under the control of Ahasuerus. Everyone was under the jurisdiction of Haman. Had they been successful, God forbid, there would not be a single Jew alive today. That was the essence of that decree. And what happened then? Through the intervention of Mordechai and Esther, and through the divine plan that God had crafted at that moment, they are able to intercede, to give permission and support from the king to defend themselves. They're able to defend themselves against the attempted genocide, and the Jewish people are saved. That is a remarkable story. That is why we celebrate Purim. Where does the name Purim come from? It is the method that Haman used to choose the date for the annihilation of the Jewish people by casting lots, and therefore the festival is called Purim. Could there be anything which is less critical to the story than how he chose the date? What difference does it make what date it was on? If it had been another date, would it not have been a serious threat? And furthermore, why do we care how he chose the date? Even if you say the date was significant, why do we care how he chose the date? So why call the festival Purim of all the names? Purim meaning the casting of lots, and it's not even a Hebrew word. It was a Persian word that was used, and this is where the festival gets its name from. Except for this, and I think buried inside this name is the clue to understanding what this festival is all about, because the word Purim, the casting of lots, that means haphazard, by chance, without plan, chaos. And that's what the Jewish people were facing at that time. Chaos and unpredictability, fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty of the future. And it was all of those forces that Haman brought to bear in order to make his impact and in order to carry out his plans. And for the people who were experiencing it, they were feeling their own vulnerability in the deepest sense of the word, and they had no sense of being able to predict. One moment, they were protected citizens in the empire of Ahasuerus. In the next moment, they had the sniper's sights directly on them, focusing on them, and they faced the complete annihilation. They moved from the light into the darkness, and there was no sense of the warning of what this was, that it was going to come, and it therefore made them feel as if they were living in a world of complete chaos and a world of unpredictability and a lack of control. And it made them also feel that they were alone, and where was God? Because at the heart of creation, and what the heart of we understand about God is Seder, is order. When we look at the physical universe that God created, He created a universe with laws, with precision, with a sense of coherence. In fact, Albert Einstein writes about this, and it's well known, his comments about seeing the hand of God in the creation of this world, because he saw the incredible coherence of the entire system of nature, how it all holds together. You can feel the order, you can feel the laws of nature, you can feel the sense of God creating a world that you can predict. That is what the laws of nature. So when we encounter chaos, we then start to feel, but where is God? If there's chaos here, where is God? God is order. He is structure. He's the very essence of what order and structure and planning is all about. He planned and built a world. He used a framework. And then when we encounter that shakes our faith, and it shook their faith too, in the sense of having this the feelings of their own deep vulnerability. At the same time, what they learned in that journey was that as we began, that God built into creation and into human existence. There's the laws of nature and there's the predictability, but there is chaos. And so much of human history and even of our own personal lives is the struggle between these two. Where do we feel the presence of God? How do we find faith in chaotic times? How do we see the hand of God when things seem out of control? How do we deal with our own very deep sense of vulnerability? And why does God put us into a position like this? I think that Purim gives us a framework for answering some of these questions. And how do we go about that? The Talmud in Chulin on page 139 asks, where do we find Esther min haTorah minayin? Where do we find a reference to Queen Esther in the Torah? And it references a passage in the book of Devarim in chapter 31, where God says, Bayomahu, on that day, haster astiris panai, I will hide my face. Vanochi haster astir panai bayomahu, on that day I will hide my face. Chapter 30, verse 18. And the Torah here describes a situation of the hiddenness of God in this world. And that we need to grasp. What does that mean, that God is hidden? When it says that he's hidden, that he will hide his face, and the word Esther means hiddenness. And God is hidden in the book of Esther. You will not find God's name mentioned explicitly once. We have, according to our tradition, when it talks about Hamelech, it is a reference to God, but you will not find any direct reference to God's name in the book of Esther. His presence is hidden. The very name Esther means hiddenness. And in the hiddenness is where we see the chaos. If we can pierce the veil of the hiddenness, then we will not see the chaos. We're able to then see and feel the presence of God all around. And we need to understand that concept, because we find ourselves now, we're just before Purim, and the next festival that we celebrate is Pesach. And the Gemara says that Purim and Pesach have to be as close together as possible. How could there, when do you have a choice? I mean, the dates are fixed. But if there's a leap year and there's a second Adar, you have an option. Purim could be in the first Adar or the second Adar. The Gemara says it has to be in the second, so that it is as close to Pesach as possible, because we want to link Geula to Geula, redemption to redemption. They are both festivals of redemption. So by making that statement, the Talmud is teaching us that Pesach and Purim are both festivals of redemption, and therefore need to be as close together as possible. But they are vastly different. Why do we have a Pesach and a Purim if they're both festivals of redemption? And in actual fact, if you think about the miracles of Pesach, they dwarf the miracles of Purim. The miracles of Pesach are the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea. It's miracles which the whole world can see. So if we celebrate that, and then the miracles of Purim, okay, there was a miracle, the Jewish people were saved, but it seems comparatively to be such a small miracle in comparison to the incredible great miracle of the great miracles of Pesach. There is a qualitative difference between the miracles of Pesach and Purim. In Pesach, God's presence is revealed. He's not Hester Panim. There's no hiding of God's face. God was there for everybody to see. And in fact, God says to Moshe, he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm making these 10 plagues, and I'm going to harden the heart of Pharaoh so that I can make my signs and wonders in Egypt, and that everybody will see in the entire world. Egypt was a superpower. God broke the superpower of that generation with open miracles. Everybody could see. Eventually, even the magicians of Pharaoh and all of his advisors said, "This is the finger of God. This is the hand of God. Why are you continuing to defy God?" It was clear to everybody, God's presence, and through the 10 plagues and then through the splitting of the sea, it was so obvious to everybody. And yet in Purim, the miracles of Purim are hidden. And there we have the Hester Panim. Now, why both? And here it goes to the heart of our relationship with God. We are in a partnership with God. Our role in this world, says the Gemara, is to be a shutaf l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'ma'aseh bereshis, to be a partner with God in creation. We are here to partner with God to make this world into a better place. And that partnership will change, our role in the partnership changes depending on God's role. When God's role over Pesach is the role of the Almighty King, whose presence is felt, who reveals himself, and you can see his awesome power, then our role is much more passive. When his role is so active, that his role is a role which says, here I am, I will do everything for you. All you need to do is wait in your homes. You need to put the blood on the doorpost. Everything else God is going to do for you. Pack your matzah and get ready. Hashem will take you to wherever you need to go, and he'll make sure that when you go into the desert, you will have the food that you need, you'll have the water that you need, you'll have everything taken care of. We were passive passengers in that entire experience, and our greatest role on Pesach in that generation and all future generations is to remember, to recall, and to retell the story. But that is fundamentally a passive response. God is doing everything. Our job is, we better not forget what he did, because that lays the foundation of our faith in Hashem for all future generations. So we remember what he did. We tell the story. We tell our children. We make sure that all future generations do not forget what happened. But the role of storytelling, the role of recall, the role of remembering is fundamentally passive. God is doing everything and we are in a passive role. So when we're in this partnership, when he is active, then we are passive. But in Hester Panim, when God hides his face, the roles are reversed. Then he goes into the passive. He hides behind the veil of the chaos of this world, where we have to go and seek him out. And then we have to get active and proactive. Then Mordechai and Esther. Have you ever felt at times in life you just wish, if God would only just tell me what to do, then I'll know what to do. If God will just tell me what's going to happen, then I will know. But then we will move into the role of being passive. God is hiding behind the chaos of this world because he wants us to come forward to be his partners. And in the early phases of our history, when miracles were abundant and there was prophecy and there was clarity and everything was laid out and there were the miracles of the first temple, all of that was laid out, we were in a passive role. And that's wonderful, because in that passive role, we don't have any work to do. We can just listen and take heed. But the problem with being in that passive role is that we don't own it. We don't own our relationship and we don't own our responsibilities. And therefore, what Jewish history proved is that when we had all of these miracles, we then went into a phase where we started to forget and we went astray, and we felt that we did not have to determine history. It would all be done for us. And the Torah actually predicts it. The passage that comes where it says this in chapter 31 in the book of Devarim, this is the final words that Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people as scripted to him by God, and he's giving them a prediction for the future. And Moses has gathered the people. He knows that his end is nigh. In fact, his yortzeit, the yortzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu, the 7th of Adar, is right at this time. Moshe Rabbeinu delivers these words, and it's remarkable that he delivers these words perhaps within the week of the events of Purim taking place themselves, and he gives over the words that God scripts for him, and he says that there will be a time that God's face will be hidden. But he frames it and he says, Vayomer, God explains to Moses what to say, and he says, look, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, God says to Moses, your time to die is coming and you will lie down with your forefathers. And then when you have left this world, the nation will one day go astray. And when they go astray, then I will hide my face from them. And then they're going to have to find their way back to me. And so that dynamic changes. Instead of God being on the active side and we being the passive recipients, we then have to step up and respond and find the clarity, and we have to then play our role and find our way back to Him. But we have the clue of how to do it. Because in the very parsha where it talks about this, that God says, Va'anochi haster astir panai bayomahu, and I will hide my face from you on that day, the very next verse says, Ve'ata kisvu lachem es hashira hazois, go and write this song, Ve'lamda es b'nei Yisrael, and teach it to the Jewish people. What is the song that he is referring to? So Rashi says it's Parshat Ha'azinu, but actually the Torah Sheba'al Peh learns from this, the oral Torah learns from this, the mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah is learned from this verse. When it says write the song, it is referring to the song of the entire Torah. The Torah is called a song. It is called music. It creates the harmony, it creates the beauty, it creates the meaning, it creates the sense of purpose, the upliftment, the grandeur of our lives comes from the Torah and the mitzvahs and Hashem's wisdom. And therefore God says, Ve'ata kisvu lachem es hashira hazot, write this. It is so significant that this verse comes immediately. The verse after God says, I will hide my face. And then he says, I will hide my face. And as if to say, if God is hidden, how are we going to find Him? How are we going to find Him? We could find Him in nature, because you will see His presence in the laws of nature. But soon as we leave the laws of nature and we look into the human universe and we see the chaos and we see the suffering and we see everything that is going on around us and we see the unpredictability of it all and we feel our own vulnerability, and then we are searching for Him. And where is He in all of this? And so the Torah says, you will find me, go into the Torah. That will be your roadmap to find Hashem. And we will find Hashem through the Torah which we will learn. We will find Hashem through the mitzvahs that we will do. And then we will feel His presence. And we will feel His presence with us in the chaos of it all. Because what is so profoundly significant in this is God says, I will hide myself. Someone who is hiding is there. He doesn't say, I will abandon you. He doesn't say you will leave and abandon my Torah and therefore I will abandon you. God forbid, He does not say that. He says you won't be able to see me. You won't be able to see me, but I will still be there. And if you look carefully, you will find me. And that is what the experience the Jewish people went through at the time of Purim. They faced this Purim, the sense of uncertainty, the casting of lots, where one moment they were safe, the next moment lots were cast, and a date was set for the entire annihilation of the Jewish people. But before that date had been set, God already had in place Queen Esther, who had replaced Vashti, and she was at the right place at the right moment. And when she didn't know what to do, she said, well, maybe how can I go? I'm going to jeopardize my life. And Mordechai says to her that maybe for this moment, is this not the moment that he got Lamalchut, that you came to royalty, for this moment to be able to intervene on behalf of the Jewish people? He saw the plan of Hashem. He explained it to Esther. She saw the plan of Hashem. She risked her life. She intervened and she saved the Jewish people. All of that had been set up. And then you feel and sense God's presence in all of the events that were taking place. And that was the experience. They had to go through the feelings of vulnerability and chaos and then rediscover the presence of Hashem. And the mitzvahs of Purim show us how to find God in this world, His hidden presence in this world, and we find His presence by being His active partner. Either in Pesach, He is going to be the active partner and we're going to passively tell His story. On Purim, He is going to hide and be passive, and He's going to wait for us to tell His story and to come forward and find Him and show His presence there. And the four mitzvahs of Purim give us the blueprint for how to find Hashem in this world. Of course, the entire blueprint is the Torah and the mitzvahs. As it says, V'ata kisvu lachem et hashira hazot. But what dimensions? We will find God in the people around us. Mishloach manot. You will find God in the friends, community, support, love, relationships, the sense of society, the sense of Am Yisrael, what it means to be part of the Jewish people. That is where you will find God. through the very existence of the notion of community, of the notion of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people. We will find Hashem in Matanas Le'Evyonim, in gifts to the poor, through the Spirit of God that shines forth on the face of every human being. Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, beloved is the human being created in God's image. We will find God in people. We will see the presence of God shining forth from every human being. That is what so many of the mitzvahs of the Torah are based on. The mitzvahs of Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, between one human being and another, is the mitzvahs which guide us on how to treat one another with care, with love, with dignity, with respect, to understand, as our sages say in Pirkei Avot, that the dimension and the greatness of the human being is that we are created in God's image, to see the presence of God on every human being. As the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, Have mekabel es kol adam b'sev panim yafos, receive every person with warmth and with kindness. Ohev shalom v'roidev shalom, be a person who pursues peace and loves peace and has a warmth and a kindness and a gentleness. Find God in the people around and bring out the godly within yourself and the godly within the people around you through kindness, through compassion, through community. And then it says the mitzvah of Seudah, of having a festive meal on Purim. And the festive meal on Purim is about finding God in the physical pleasures of this world and the physical experiences of this world, because He created everything. And so that guides us on how to understand that when eating and drinking and enjoying this world, we can feel God's presence, because He gave us all of the gifts of this world. He helped us and He benefited us, and that's why we say a blessing when we eat food, when we smell beautiful spices, when we see the ocean, when we see a rainbow, when we see and enjoy the physical, the material, physical parts of this world, but as a gift from God to see and feel God's presence in the physical dimension of this world. And then we read the book of Esther, Mikra Megillah. These are the 4 mitzvahs: Mishloach Manot, Matanas Le'Evyonim, bonds of love and friendship and society and compassion. It is the Seudah, celebrating and enjoying the physical. And then finally, it is the mitzvah of reading the Megillah. And the mitzvah of reading the Megillah is the mitzvah of discovering Hashem's presence. It is the mitzvah of discovering Hashem's presence in all of the events that surround us, to have bitachon, to have trust. And we find that through learning Torah. Ultimately, va'ata kisvu lachem es hashira hazos. We want to understand God, want to feel His presence, want to discover Him, want to see and feel and understand who He is. We do that through learning His Torah, because that is the book that He wrote. Those are His ideas. We want to know about Him. That is where we go. And the reading of the Megillah is indeed that very interesting thing. The bracha, the blessing that He said before the Megillah, is al mikra Megillah. Not lishmoa, not to listen to the Megillah. When the shofar, it is lishmoa, to hear the shofar, because that's experiential. It is an experience. We listen, it's to hear the sounds of the shofar that has an emotional impact. The Megillah is through reading and understanding it. And we fulfill that publicly. When one person reads it, they read it, we listen and fulfill our mitzvah. But we are reading, we're not just listening. Reading means reading life. Reading means learning, understanding, discovering, seeing the presence of Hashem. We do that through trust, and we do that through the learning of Torah, because when we learn Torah, we look at the world through the eyes of Hashem. When we read Megillas Esther, we feel and see the presence of Hashem. We see the order beneath the chaos. We have a glimpse of His greatness. We have a glimpse of His order. We have a glimpse of His plans. It's only a glimpse, because as human beings we can only see a glimpse. When Moses was on Mount Sinai and he was at the pinnacle of his spiritual greatness, and he had a moment to ask God any question, and he said to God, Hareini na kavodecha, I want to ask you a question. Show me your glory. According to the Gemara, the question that he asked is, I don't understand suffering in this world. Tzadik v'ralo, why are there righteous people that suffer? Rasha v'tovlo, why are there wicked people that prosper? And then God said to him, Lo yirani adam v'chai, no man can see me and live. To understand all of that, you would have to understand me. And then God says to him, you will see my back. You'll see a glimpse. What is it? God doesn't have a back. He has no body. It means you will see a glimpse of it. There will be moments that you will see glimpses of this ultimate plan of Hashem. We will never see the full picture, and we will never fully understand it. But what we do through those glimpses, and in the moments of Purim, where we see a glimpse of what looks like, in the words of Haman, Purim, the casting of lots, which is so random and so chaotic and so unpredictable. We look and pierce the veil of Purim, and we see beneath that Esther. We move aside Purim and we see Esther. We see this isn't chaos. God is there. He's controlling. He is present. He hides beneath it, but He is there. He is present, and He is holding us. And ultimately, we are in His loving embrace. We often don't understand how things turn out. We cannot begin to comprehend this world. But we know one thing. Chaos is merely the veneer. It is merely the externality. Beneath that is Hashem, who is holding everything together and is holding us in His loving embrace. And on Purim, we therefore make peace with the chaotic world in which we live, because we can feel Hashem. We see and discover Hashem in the people around us. We feel and discover Hashem in the magnificence of this physical world. And we see and discover Hashem in the incredible wisdom that He left us. Ve'ata kisvu lachem es hashira hazos. I will hide my face. And the very next verse He says, but now go and write yourself a Sefer Torah. Go and see the music. Because what is music? Music is when you take disparate notes which don't seem to amount to anything, but when you piece them together, something beautiful emerges. There is an order, but it's not an order which is a structured order like mathematics or the building of a brickwork that makes a construction. There is something which is spiritual there. There's something which moves. There is something which is intangible that creates the beauty of the experience. And from the chaos comes the beauty. From that chaos comes the order. And we see that music when we learn Torah and connect to Hashem. And so that is the great joy of Purim. To see past Purim and to see Esther, to see that God is hidden, and therefore if He's hidden, He's actually present and He is with us. And when we have His presence with us and we see His presence in the people around us and discover His wisdom in how to look at our lives and understand the purpose and the vision of why we are here as individuals, as part of the Jewish people, then we can truly experience the joy of what it is to be alive, to live in this world, and to embrace the uncertainty of this world with the joy of God's presence that brings us that ultimate sense of joy. Purim Sameach to all.